Hello, MCU fans! Today is going to be my breakdown and review of Captain America Brave New World. We'll be talking about Easter eggs, timeline placement, and so much more. Obviously, there will be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a February contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. All right, so we start off with an election night victory party for President Ross. He's just been elected, so that puts us in November of some year. We'll talk about that later. Now, Marvel did tell us up front he is going to be a newly elected U.S. president, but we were all kind of scratching our heads because, Ritson was the president in Secret Invasion. They implied he was only a one-term president, but we all want to understand, when did this election cycle take place? When was Ritson elected? When was Ross elected? Etc. So more on that as we get deeper in. Okay, so then we have a 5-month time jump. If we were in November, this would seemingly put us in April, but again, we don't yet know the year. All right, so we see that Sam is on a mission for the president. He's literally working for the president. He does this awesome landing, but I'm so glad that they fixed this issue in the trailers. This is the later trailers, but the earlier trailers, ooh, look at that, had his foot bent. Here we see it again. This is from the later trailers and from the earlier trailers. That just has to hurt. But anyway, his landing has some nice side effects. He says, wait for it. And his vibranium outfit is what allows him to have this sonic boom that sends everybody against the walls. Then he does some nice kick butt moves. I thought this one was really cool. These dudes are at the other end of the hallway, and he rockets down the hallway with his jetpack and his shield in place. That was really sweet. However, with everything going on, it's more than he can handle alone, because their mission is to retrieve this. This, we find out eventually, is some stolen adamantium, stolen from Japan, and it takes Torres, as now the newly minted Falcon, to take them down. I love where he's like, hey, did anybody see this? He's really bummed. No one saw his awesome moves. But anyway, now we see why Falcon is so busy, because Giancarlo Esposito enters the scene. We have Falcon throwing his shield at him, and he just ducks. That's awesome. And we learn that he is playing Seth Volker, a.k.a. Sidewinder. He looks much cooler than in the comics. I love the Serpent Society in the comics, but their costumes were pretty outlandish. So interestingly, he's not the only Serpent Society member. We also see Copperhead over on the right. And in fact, if we zoom in on his badge, it does indeed, it's very blurred, but say Serpent Society. Sometimes they were referred to as the Serpents in the movie, but I think officially they call themselves Serpent Society. Interestingly, Diamondback was cut from the movie. We know she was supposed to be there. She was legit on a McDonald's toy, right? So she was supposed to be in the movie, but she wasn't. And Seth Rollins was seemingly cut from the movie as well. Maybe he was going to play Giancarlo's role. Anyway, great to see Cap and Falcon together again. You might remember from Falcon the Winter Soldier, when Falcon's wings were injured, he gave them to Torres. Torres is like, hey, you forgot your wings. And he's like, keep them. Well, we can see that he has indeed kept them and upgraded them quite nicely. It's also worth noting that Captain America's outfit was damaged in this battle, which is why he's going to get a new suit. And then we see President Ross visiting his late wife's gravesite. Ironically, in the trailers, it actually had Moore on the grave, which presumably is referring to Nate Moore, the producer for this movie, who did actually leave Marvel on good terms after this movie. And in fact, he'll be back to do Black Panther 3. But yeah, clever joke in the trailers. But now we see the actual grave. That is his wife in the comics as well, who also died in the comics. So nice touch. Then this is interesting. He says, it's coming up on the end of my first 100 days. Okay, this really fits nicely continuity-wise, because if he was inaugurated on January 20th, which is when presidents in the real world are inaugurated, 100 days in would put us in April. So everything is pointing towards an April month for this movie. We just still don't know the year. And then we see him say, I'll show the world I've changed, really changed. Of course, most important to him is for his daughter, Betty, to see he's changed, because he has not seen her since that first Incredible Hulk movie. Crazy. And then we also meet Layla Taylor, who is his head of security. Now, she is from the comics. In fact, she's a romantic interest off and on with the Falcon in the comics. That doesn't end up happening, obviously, in the movie. But here's what's really wild. There was no funeral at all. Remember in the trailers, we saw this gun salute, which is typically for somebody really important who has died. We see Sam at the funeral. In fact, notice this sting on his arm. Behind the scenes photos showed that he was going to be injured at whatever this event was, this funeral. And there's Taylor with him. And even Betty showed up to this funeral in the behind the scenes photos. So we're all wondering who was going to originally die in the movie? Maybe Ross? I mean, that was everybody's guess. So kind of wild. Let me know your thoughts on that entire thing being cut from the movie. But anyway, Sam now takes Torres to meet Isaiah. He says, "What's up, OG?" And of course, we see Isaiah, who says, "Who's the pretty boy?" Now, Isaiah, you remember from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he had been in prison for 30 years unjustly and has finally now been exonerated. And Torres responds to him with, "Pretty boy, you didn't tell Gramps about me? I'm the new Falcon." Okay, so this is really important. Sam says this is Joaquin Torres, been working with him for 3 years and haven't figured out how to shut him up yet. But 3 years, right? Well, we know from the timeline book, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is in spring of 2024. So that means we're in 2027, thus April of 2027. It's all fitting together really nicely. We also learn on the news that it's been 2 years after Isaiah was exonerated for his unjust charges that I mentioned earlier. Well, 2 years after what point? Well, in the timeline book, he wasn't exonerated until after summer of 2024, so that would only be 2 years from that point. So timeline-wise, this is all working together really well. And then, oh my word, I cannot believe they did this. They literally gave us the month, the day, and the year on screen. I mean, it was there for just a brief moment, but April 16th of 2027. Let me know in the comments if you can remember another time, at least in recent history, maybe ever though, that the MCU has given us that much exact information about when something is happening. So yeah, everything points to April of 2027. So therefore, I'm going to say definitively, right, Captain America Brave New World is in April of 2027. We'll talk more about Thunderbolts and why I think that's in May, and also the top bar there and those dates. We'll come back to those as well. All right, so Sam now heads to the White House with that invite that he got, right? And then I think this is so wild. Notice they're all posing in front of these posters that say Celestial Island World Summit. Well, notice it's the same shot from an early trailer, except look what it says, Global Unity Summit. What on earth? I mean, it was changed to Celestial Island World Summit from Global Unity Summit. Why? Why did they change that? That is wild. I mean, it's the same shot, right? Because we see Isaiah and Sam and Torres. And then this is interesting. In that earlier trailer shot, we saw what looked like, to many of us, the leader's hand, because that looks like a green hand. But obviously, that didn't happen in the movie because the leader was able to do everything he did remotely. But yeah, wild to see all these changes they made. All right, so Sam is off to see the president, and he says to him, "I have to admit, I'm still getting used to the new look," which is a nice meta reference to the fact that William Hurt, RIP, is no longer playing the role, and now it's Harrison Ford. And of course, we've seen that happen many times. Rhodey's character was recast, Bruce Banner's, and Cassie's. So not the first time, for sure. But anyway, he says they said lose the mustache or lose the election, which again confirms that he was newly elected. So let's talk about this then. How was there an election in 2026? All right, so we know that Trump was elected in 2016. The Luke Cage series makes that crystal clear. You can check out my longer video on the presidents for more on that. I'm going to throw out that I think he must have been blipped. Now, granted, there's a line of succession if you get blipped, but what if the country as a whole said, no, half of us are gone, we want to do a new election, and that new election happened in November of 2018. All right, so someone would have been elected. Let's just say it was Biden for argument's sake. So he'd have been president from 2019 to 2022. Then let's say Ritson was elected in 2023 to 2026. Of course, Trump coming back from the blip and not being president, that would be interesting to see how he handled that. But that's the only way that I can get to having an election in November of 2026. Otherwise, I just don't know how to make it work. So let me know your thoughts. I mean, obviously the movie did not give us any indication of how this was supposed to work. Also, it's interesting, we don't know who Ross's vice president was, and that's important because he's no longer president at the end of the movie, and we'll talk more about that later. So back to this then. So we know Captain America Brave New World is in April of 2027, but that's why I'm now saying Secret Invasion cannot be in November of 2026. It has to be prior to that because Ritson was still president, and they were talking about him being a real one-term president, so we didn't know that he lost yet. Also, it does help the Marvels out a little bit to have it be in September instead of November, and then I've always thought Agatha all along is in October. So anyway, I will do many more timeline videos in the future, but this is how I think everything shaped out thanks to this movie. Okay, so Ross makes an interesting offer to Sam. You and I haven't always agreed on how much latitude enhanced individuals deserve. But what you've accomplished has given me a reason to reconsider. What he's referring to is Sam retrieving that adamantium that we saw earlier in the movie. So, this is interesting. In one of the earlier trailers, he legit said, "But I want to make another run at making Captain America an official military position." So it seems like maybe early on, they were not going to talk about reforming the Avengers, but just making Captain America, officially working for the president. Nope, that line's not in the movie. Instead, he says, which is why I want you, Captain America, to help me rebuild the Avengers. So I'm glad they went this direction because I've always wondered, is there an Avengers team or not? So really briefly, let's look at what we've learned about the Avengers since Endgame. So in April of 2024, at the end of Shang-Chi, we see that they're basically meeting via Zoom, right? In July of 2024, in Far From Home, Talos says, everyone keeps asking where the Avengers are, and I don't know what to say to that. So clearly, there's no Avengers at this point. October 2024, the Eternals are talking about the fact that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are gone, so who's going to lead the Avengers? Again, no Avengers. In December 2024, we get Rogers the musical, so as far as the public is concerned, everything's fine. April of 2025, She-Hulk is being discussed as joining the Avengers and then is asked if she was rejected by the Avengers. So again, I think the public believes there is an Avengers, but there obviously isn't. April of 2025, Scott releases his book, which was awesome. And obviously the public is like, yay, rah, Avengers. And in fact, in May of 2025, we see that he is on tour down on the news ticker for his book tour. Then in September 2025, the fallen Avengers are honored in Ms. Marvel during AvengerCon. In July of 2026 now, we're all the way to July of 2026, still no mention of the Avengers, but Scott is doing book readings about his book. So again, the public's thinking, yay, raw Avengers, they're all fine. But this is really important. August of 2026, which is when I think Secret Invasion is happening, they're talking about the fact that what happens if the Avengers return, which that to me tells us for sure there ain't no Avengers team, right? September 2026 during the Marvels, Kamala wants to join the Avengers thinking this is an Avengers test. And then finally in May of 2027, which is my guess for the Thunderbolts, we have Val saying, let's talk facts. The Avengers are not coming. So who will keep the American people safe? So not only does that 100% establish there is no Avengers team, I don't think there's even one forming right after Brave New World. It's probably going to take a little while. And I'm betting Sam and Bucky together are going to create the new team. All right, so Sam is very confused by this change, says, well, with all due respect, sir, when you passed the Sokovia Accords, you tore the Avengers apart. And he says, well, I represent all Americans now, and half of them wouldn't even been here if not for the Avengers. So definitely he has a change of heart. But Sam is suspicious when we disagree on how to manage the situation. And really all that Ross gives him is, work with me, Sam. We'll figure it out later. Oh boy. I see why Sam is a little worried about that type of a promise from Ross. All right, so time for a photo op. Look how happy Japan is that America has retrieved that stolen adamantium for them. In particular, Captain America retrieved it. So now we're off to the Celestial Island World Summit. And doggone it, I want to know, how do they even know it's a Celestial? So my guess is maybe one of the Eternals told people about it. Sprite would make sense. We know she's still on Earth. She's now human. So maybe she reported that it used to be a Celestial. If you think back to She-Hulk, which is mid-2025, it just said, why is there a giant statue of a man sticking out of the ocean? So it seems they didn't know much about it then, but maybe eventually they found out. Well, anyway, everyone's there to learn about Celestial Island. We see Sam and Torres intently listening. Ross explains we squabbled over it. In fact, you can see France, USA, Japan, and India all having an interest in Celestial Island. And why? Well, because it has adamantium, the world's most versatile element. And of course, that's interesting because in Wakanda Forever, which is in mid-2025, everyone was fighting over vibranium. And when Ross even said, what if the US was the only country with vibranium? Val was like, oh, actually, I dream about that. So clearly in mid-2025, they did not know the Celestial Island was made of adamantium. And it does raise the question of why. Why did it turn into such a valuable metal? Well, remember, in the Guardians movie, we learned about the severed head of an ancient celestial being and how people mine the organic matter from within the skull. And in fact, the bone, brain tissue, spinal fluid, they're all rare resources, highly valued in black markets across the galaxy. And that's all in a natural celestial's head. Remember, Cersei then turned it into something else on top of that. So obviously, that's how we ended up with the island being made of adamantium. Very, very valuable. So here's a raw sample, and they talk about a refined sample. And in particular, that leads to the first and only refined sample was stolen from a Japanese mining site, but happily it's been recovered. And to thank for that, we have our own Captain America. So of course, that's referring again to that mission at the beginning of the movie. Everyone's applauding. Sam's quite happy with the situation, obviously, and Ross says, we'll show the world a better way forward. Unfortunately, things are about to take a turn for the worse because we hear this music start playing through the room, and Isaiah gets clearly triggered. I mean, look, you can see his face. He has no idea what's going on right now, stands up, and he's about to do an attack. So let's talk briefly about this music. The song is the Fleetwood's Mr. Blue, and obviously it's the leader that's behind this attack, and he referred to himself as Mr. Blue way, way, way back in the Incredible Hulk movie. So that is very clever. Okay, so obviously Isaiah now goes after the president, grabs this dude, pulls his gun out, throws him against a wall, and cocks his gun, and now takes a shot at the president. And I remember watching the trailers thinking, how is Ross not dead? Surely he could hit him at point blank range. But remember, the leader didn't want Ross dead. He wanted to torture Ross. So yeah, he definitely did not want him killed yet. All right, so Sam takes out another Secret Service agent who's been triggered, and Ross takes one out, proving that, yes, he can indeed still throw a punch. I love that. So now it's getting really serious. The big guns are coming in, so Isaiah takes off, jumps out the window. Sam takes off, and he's like, okay, I can't do that. So he has to run down the stairs. But then we see that eventually they catch up with poor Isaiah, who only at this moment comes out of his trance and is just terrified. He's like, I can't go back to jail. Remember, he'd been in jail for 30 years unjustly. And Sam feels terrible about the situation, really wants to fix things quickly. So that's why he makes this bold move, heads down, basically breaks into the Situation Room. Yikes, could have been killed. But anyway, Ross is okay with it. He says everybody else out, but she stays. All right, so let's talk about her for a minute. So Marvel got in front of this back in July of 2024, telling us that Ruth is a former Black Widow and is now a high-ranking U.S. government official who has the trust of President Ross. They did that because in the comics, this same character, who also goes by Sabra, is a, let's just say, very politically charged character. And with all that's going on over in the Middle East, Marvel did not want people to think this is how they were adapting her. So I really wonder what Marvel's original plans were for her, but certainly in the movie, she is nothing like this character in the comics. All right, so this is also interesting. There are a lot of scenes with her that were cut. Look at this one where she's basically looking at, I believe, Ross's arm when he's Red Hulk. And she's saying, don't say I didn't warn you. I mean, that's not in the movie, but it was in the trailers. I really want to see the deleted scenes for this movie. There is so much that I think was changed over time with this movie. Okay, so what do we learn about the attack? Well, it turns out there were 5 total shooters, that this was a coordinated terrorist attack. And later in the movie, he even says, I was a wartime general, now I'm a wartime president. Yikes. So Sam says, sir, your inner circle has been compromised. Either you can't see that or you don't want to. Let me fix it. So this is interesting. In the trailers, they make it seem very adversarial because Ross in the trailer says, watch yourself. You may be Captain America, but you're not Steve Rogers, to which he says, you're right, I'm not. In the actual movie, it was nowhere near this confrontational. Ross was just basically saying, you're too close to the situation. Your best friend, Isaiah, nearly tried to kill me. We can't have you working on this. Nonetheless, though, Sam is still ticked and goes outside and talks to Taylor about how mad he is. And then he goes to visit Isaiah, which he actually was not supposed to do. But Isaiah says, you asked for me, here I am. You want to help me? And sure enough, Sam wants to know, is there anything you remember? So Isaiah explains that he remembers looking at his phone and doesn't really remember anything else until he was being arrested. So obviously he was under mental control by someone who, of course, will turn out to be the leader. So he then says, whatever this is, Cap, be careful. So some of this dialogue was changed from the trailers, but essentially Sam meets with Isaiah and learns a lot more about this conspiracy. Then, talk about being careful, right? So Sam is driving without his suit on, and we suddenly see that Sidewinder now tries to take Sam out. And yeah, he does a pretty good job of nearly taking Sam out, lighting up his vehicle, firing away, obviously leads to an explosion, which clearly Sam was not in that vehicle, but man, he would have been toast if he was, clearly. All right, so Sidewinder then checks for proof of death, goes in for the kill if necessary, but Sam comes out, attacks him, shoves him against the vehicle, ends up getting jabbed by one of Sidewinder's knives, but he gets Sidewinder back, nice kick here, and takes him out, and then gets a call from the leader, who basically starts to troll him, giving him a little information, but not too much. All right, so let's talk about the leader, right? We last saw him way back in The Incredible Hulk when some of the gamma-irradiated blood fell on him and basically turned his brain into, well, this giant thing. So sometimes his brain is a big, tall brain in the comics, but sometimes it's just nasty lumpy, which is the direction they definitely went in the movie with him. So meanwhile, Ross is trying to repair things with Japan. So why is that necessary? Well, because the leader has leaked to Japan that the CIA was involved in the theft of that adamantium at the beginning of the movie. So yeah, Japan's like, dude, you basically tried to steal our adamantium and then pretended like you rescued it and got it back again? No, no deal. We're done. So yeah, Ross is really ticked. Things did not end well. He is slowly losing it. We see a little later where he's just banging his fist on the table with rage, obviously, a Red Hulk slowly starting to come out, and basically says, if only one country is going to control it, adamantium, it's going to be us. So he gets in a plane to head towards Celestial Island. I think it's so funny when he says, I don't want a variable out there that I can't control. And of course, he is going to end up being the variable that cannot be controlled. All right, so meanwhile, Ruth has figured out how the shooters were activated because she's looked on these cameras. Here she sees Isaiah getting activated by the phone. Here we see this other dude getting activated. So yeah, she is on to what's going on and now knows Isaiah is innocent. And likewise, Sam and Torres have figured out the same thing. I love their headquarters. This is actually really, really cool looking place. But they also figure out what the source was for those mind control signals that controlled Isaiah and the others. We know it was the leader involved. They don't know that yet, but they do know where the signals are coming from. So Ross told me to stay out of this, and Torres is like, he's just the president of the United States. So Sam's like, yeah, we're getting in. We're going to take care of this. Notice he has his new suit now because the other one, again, was damaged in his battle with the Serpent Society. Okay, Ruth, on the other hand, is now worried for Isaiah because she knows that he was set up, and she finds this guard just literally shooting up Isaiah's cell. So she yells, stop, and when she gets there, we see that everyone has been killed except Isaiah. Interesting. So why did the leader do this at this point in time? Because he wanted to stop Sam and Torres from their investigation. He thought, because he was using probabilities to project what might end up happening, he thought this would get them to return and go back. Nope, they didn't. Instead, they head off to Camp Echo 1. That's the location where those signals were coming from. Now, in the comics, this does exist. It is a location. In fact, it was going to be used to try to hold the Hulk at one point. And it's the first of a couple Easter eggs that Amadeus Cho was supposed to show up in this movie. There had been rumors, at least, that his character is going to appear, because in the comics, he helps actually build this facility. So Amadeus Cho is the son of Helen Cho, who, of course, showed up in Age of Ultron. But no Amadeus Cho, unfortunately. All right, so Sam and Torres continue going down these hallways, these dark hallways, until they come to the lab where presumably the leader has been doing all of his work. It is a creepy looking lab. Look at the chair, look at that table where you can strap people down. This clearly looks like a device sending lights as he was testing his mind control. Here's everybody who he has been mind controlling, including upper right-hand corner. There's Isaiah. So he's been planning this out for a while. This is interesting, though. In the trailers, they had a Reset Ross, Reset America on the board. That wasn't actually in the movie, so I'm guessing they cut that because they didn't want Sam to know yet that the leader was going after Ross. However, the leader does make an appearance, and he talks about what Ross has done to him. Basically, Ross has helped turn him into this monstrosity because he's super smart, right? He can come up with all these projections of things that may or may not happen. So Ross continued the experimenting on him to make his brain grow, well, nastier and nastier. And actually, Ross has kept him a prisoner for 16 years, he explains. And Ross had promised to let him go free once Ross became president. So you could argue the leader is the reason Ross was able to manipulate things and become president, right? But let's talk about this 16 years thing. So that actually fits pretty well because the Incredible Hulk movie takes place in spring of 2010, which means that someone captured Stern and gave him over to Ross, who has now had him for 16 years. We're going to learn a little bit more about that in a minute. But all right, so Sam goes after the leader, but the leader traps Sam under this sonic blast and then lets his goons try to take on Sam and Torres. Pretty good fight. Really cool hallway fight where he throws the shield down the hallway. Then Ruth joins because now Ruth understands that this is all just a big setup. She does a real nice flip there. And they take off and head out only for Sam and Torres to be arrested. So under the president's orders, he's been arrested, but then suddenly the leader uses mind control to take these guys over and they open fire. Obviously, Sam, Torres, and Ruth get away, but yeah, that was crazy. But now Sam wants to know more about these pills that the leader was giving to Ross. So he takes them to a friend of his, and this friend contacts someone else to investigate the pills. My guess is that someone else would have been Amadeus Cho if he had not been cut from the movie. Well, anyway, this poor dude, though, gets killed because the leader takes him out, looking like the Unabomber in that scene. But I was kind of bummed that it didn't turn out this was tied back to She-Hulk's blood being stolen. Remember, Josh steals some of her blood for the Hulk King, but I was kind of hoping the leader was behind all of this. I mean, granted, she did go to Kevin and rewrite some of her story, but the timeline book made it really clear that the part that was rewritten was only the ending. She wrote a new finale, but her blood was still stolen. So I wonder if they'll ever pick up on this. I'm kind of betting at this point that they won't, which is a bummer. So next, Sam gets some intel from Sidewinder. Of course, Sidewinder wants to negotiate to get out of jail, to get parole, and he explains that his old unit found Stearns in Harlem. So remember, I said someone captured Stearns and eventually gave him over to Ross? Well, it turns out it must have been Sidewinder's group. And that's interesting because there was this comic back when Marvel did a bunch of these tie-in comics. There was one for Fury's Big Week, and notice on the right, it was the Black Widow that captured Stearns, shot him in the leg, and delivered him over to S.H.I.E.L.D. So I guess this has been retconned now. I mean, as soon as I knew the leader was going to appear in the movie, I was hoping they would tie into what happened in this comic, but oh well. I mean, the comics are kind of canon until they get overridden. So at least this part of the comic is no longer canon. All right, so Sam and Torres now arrive at Celestial Island because there's about to be a war between the U.S. and Japan. As you can see here, Japan versus the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Things are not going well. Not real clear whether Ross is happy to see Sam, but hey, Sam's here. Deal with it, right? In fact, they go off and they have a private discussion, and this is where Sam learns what was going on with those pills. Basically, Ross explains that he was dying. I mean, he was having all those heart attacks, and now the leader was saying these pills would help save him, but of course, at the same time, they were feeding him gamma radiation, which will turn him ultimately into the Red Hulk. Craziness. All right, so the battle has now begun between Japan and the U.S., and I don't even know if this scene showed up in the movie. I mean, a lot of the scenes from the trailers with Ruth were ultimately cut, but yeah, clearly the fighting has been going on, and on top of all of it, the leader has called in to taunt Ross. His goal is to get Ross to turn into the Red Hulk on the battleship, right, during all this craziness. And it almost happens. You can see Ross's eyes are turning red, and here he's crushing things with his bare hands, but he manages to hold off the change. Then we see that the fight for the control of Celestial Island is on, right? And this really cool shot of Celestial Island. I love that. Of course, it looks just like it did back in the Eternals movie when Cersei ultimately changed it into what we now know is adamantium. Okay, so now the battle has begun, but what we see is nobody really wants to have this fight. Basically, the leader has taken over two of the U.S. fighter jet pilots and is causing this fight. So now Falcon and Captain America are trying to stop the U.S. fighter pilots that have been taken over. So this is a really cool move by Falcon, cuts this wing right off. That was sweet. But unfortunately, some missiles are fired, and in this case, Sam throws his shield and it ricochets off and blows up several of the missiles. Then he puts the shield in front of him and rams through another one. That was really cool. This whole scene was incredible. So then this missile gets through, hits one of the ships, but real tragedy occurs when Torres is trying to stop this missile, but he stops it too late and it explodes and knocks him out of the sky. So wow, that was terrifying. Turns out now he is indeed in the hospital, very, very badly injured. And while Sam is watching over Torres, we get Bucky. What an incredible cameo. I loved seeing the two of them talking together. What was interesting, though, is Sam refers to him as a future congressman. Now, in the Thunderbolts trailer, I assumed he already was a congressman, but Bucky even mentions having to get to a campaign event. So maybe he's just running for Congress and was invited as a special guest? I guess we'll have to find out in the Thunderbolts, but it seems like he's not yet a congressman. So also in the movie, Bucky is mentioned to be 110 years old. So does this work? Yes, but just barely. Because in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he says he's 106. We learn in the Winter Soldier movie that he was born in 1917. So can he be 106 in Falcon and the Winter Soldier and 110 in Captain America 4? Yes, if and only if his birthday is in mid-April. Because that would mean he hadn't hit his birthday yet in April of 2024, so he was 106, but he has hit his birthday in April of 2027 because he's now 110. So his birthday has to be mid-April, and I think it all works. Craziness. Marvel and ages, they always make it harder than they need to. All right, so now we see that the leader is surrendering to Sam to quote-unquote complete his plan. I'm not 100% sure why he had to surrender, but my guess is he felt like if he did not personally tell everyone what Ross did to him, then no one would believe it. So, okay, maybe he went for a plea deal. I don't know. One thing I think is interesting is this sure seemed like it was going to be the leader. See the dude with that crazy US hat on there covering his noggin? One would assume he was wearing that so they couldn't see those bumps on his head. Well, this never showed up in the movie. So this is yet another trailer scene with him showing up, I guess, at the hospital that was seemingly cut. So nonetheless, the leader has now turned himself in, and Ross is at a press conference trying to explain everything that's happened. The whole CIA thing and Japan and that whole mess. And while he's saying that, over the loudspeaker, we hear the leader basically telling everyone what Ross has done, and the leader has sent messages to the press so they're aware of all of his bad deeds. He starts to go nuts, starts to get angry, and finally, yes, we get that conversion into the Red Hulk. And I will say, this part of the movie was fantastic. I thought he looked incredible. I was really, really impressed. So glad to see him finally turning red so he can take on Sam. And I love that the press is like, since when were they red? Now, I don't know why they keep thinking guns are going to stop this dude. They're not going to stop him. These guns aren't going to stop him. No, he is on a rampage. Ends up destroying some of the White House. I thought this was crazy, where he throws one of the planes into another plane, destroying both. He ends up damaging the Washington Monument. Doggone it, that thing just got fixed from all the craziness during Homecoming. Leave that thing alone. I love that thing. Anyway, White House down, right? Destroys it, jumps off of it, into the air, and now finally Sam enters the fight. And I'm sure Sam is thinking the same thing we are, which is, how is this going to work? So a couple nice moves. He says, you want me? Come and get me. And Red Hulk throws this car at him. He does this awesome move with his now vibranium wings, remember, and he's able to slice through them, so that's pretty cool. Luckily, he has his shield, because that's going to come in handy. Well, until Red Hulk takes it, so that's not good. Yeah, things just go from bad to worse. Dude is very upset. Angrier he gets, the more fiery he gets. So yeah, very scary. They're all wondering, how are we going to get out of this? So then Sam comes up with this nice 1-2 punch. Punch number 1, shooting these spikes from his wings, as well as actually using his vibranium wing to stab the Red Hulk, because the Hulk can be injured that way. And then punch number 2 is using Red Hulk's love of Betty to calm him down. Because when one of the cherry blossom petals lands in his hand, he remembers how he would walk through those very trees with Betty when she was a little girl. So yeah, Sam is able to now talk him down, and he changes back to Ross. And I am really hoping that CGI that made him look so skinny, because woo, if that's really Harrison Ford, he needs to have a big meal tonight. Anyway, he has now changed back into Ross, calmed down, and he is willing to take responsibility for all of this damage and more. Oh my gosh, he destroyed everything. He is now sent off to the Raft, and he steps down from being president, which, man, dude did not even make it 100 days into his presidency. Crazy, just crazy. But that's why we all need to know, who is his vice president, because they are now president. But we know he's not alone on the Raft, because in Luke Cage's series, Willis Stryker, a.k.a. Diamondback, is there. From Jessica Jones' series, Trish Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat, is there. And of course, everyone's favorite, Baron Zemo, is hanging out there as well. So it is really weird to see Sam looking in on Ross, because they mention it's quite a switch from, well, when, Sam was the one behind the bars. Then we get my favorite cameo of the movie. I mean, it only lasted 30-some seconds, but man, seeing Betty show up and talk to him, oh my goodness. Even my son was teary-eyed after this. What a great scene. What a great scene. All right, so they wrap things up by telling us that Celestial Island Treaty has been signed, so America and Japan are okay now. There'll be equal distribution of the adamantium to everyone. Torres is recovering, and Sam is realizing he really does need to start up the Avengers. So I think he's going to team up with Bucky after the Thunderbolts to build a new team. We see that Isaiah has now been set free. Man, poor dude has been through so much. And then finally we get our post-credit scene, only one, and Sam goes back to visit with the leader. And we get this ominous speech from the leader. The leader says, we share the same world, don't we? The world you would die to save? Well, it's coming. I've seen it in the probabilities, seen it plain as day. All you heroes protecting this world, do you think you're the only ones? And then he says, do you think this is the only world? We'll see what happens when you have to protect this place from the others. Now, I'm wondering when he says others, is he meaning other heroes, other villains, or, and this is what I think he means, other worlds? I think he's referring to, 838, 10005, the Fantastic Four universe, etc. So yeah, that is really cool. But it does raise the question, How did the leader learn about the multiverse? Well, in my mind, there are so many public events that the leader would be aware of. I mean, No Way Home, there was a giant rip in the sky. Multiverse of Madness, that one-eyed creature appears out of nowhere, right? And battles in New York. So these are very public things he would be aware of. And then I can't help but wonder, he's got all kinds of information. He probably found out through the government about the rift in the sky in the Marvels, and Scott Lang's got loose lips. Probably he heard about Scott Lang's whole experience with Kang. So actually, you put these things together and easily I could see how the leader would understand what's going on in the multiverse. I mean, heck, Reed Richards on his chalkboard figured out the multiverse. So I am betting that the leader is now going to be a key part of Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars because he's going to have information that can help everyone know what's coming. Cannot wait to see where things go from here. All right, so let me know. What did you think about this movie? I mean, I liked it. It's not my favorite movie, but I thought it was okay. It was enjoyable. And it was fun to see Captain America versus the Hulk. We saw it in the comics, and now we finally got to see it in the movies. Red Hulk was fantastic. The battle over Celestial Island, that was fantastic. So, yeah, overall, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think about the movie? And tell me if I missed anything that you thought was important. All right, so don't forget, February contest, be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And of course, we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And then I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the spoiler section for Captain America Brave New World, talking about everything that went down. We have 1,900 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and we would love for you to be part of them. So I will leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.